left off in the last lesson, there's our heart with all of its parts and the purple arrows showing the flow of blood. It's very difficult to see the purple arrows and to appreciate that flow. So we're gonna make a little flow chart to track the way blood moves through the heart. But before we do that, I just want to point out that there were two more sets of valves. One here inside the aorta and one here inside the pulmonary artery. And these are also controls to make the blood not flow the wrong way, right? To prevent them from backwards. And there's two names for these as well. They're actually very easy to remember. The one in the aorta is called the aortic valve. Aortic valve. And the one in the pulmonary artery, right there, is called the pulmonary valve. So we can just kind of add those into our picture as well. So there's four major valves in the heart that we want to be aware of. The two that separate the atria and ventricles, right? The mitral valve on the left side and the tricuspid valve on the right, but also these valves in the major veins and arteries. Actually, only in the arteries. The veins themselves don't require valves because we'll talk about blood pressure a little bit later, and we'll realize that it's not necessary. So only the pulmonary artery has the pulmonary valve. It makes sense, right? And the aorta has the aortic valve as well. Okay, so let's go down and make a little flow chart to help us understand how blood flows. And again, I'll use my red and my red and my blue. All right, now to do the flow chart, we're going to have to twist the heart, the top half, the other way around. So this is not a picture anymore, so don't get confused and think that things on the left are on the left and on the right. This is just a flow chart to show the direction the blood flows. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put in black the parts of the heart. So I'm going to put the left atrium, L atrium. Whoops, I'm going to have to spell things, right? Left atrium. And then below it, I'm going to put the right ventricle. So I'm twisting the heart here. And then over here, right, I'm going to put the right atrium and the left ventricle. So the ventricles are in the right position, but the atriums are sort of flipped because the left ventricle pumps everything. Eventually, it ends up in the right atrium. So to keep the chart from getting too confusing, we'll twist the heart around. Okay, now the first thing, let's just go from the left ventricle. So this is blood that's already come from the lungs. So we're going to use a red arrow. We're going to draw a little line like this. And the first place it goes is through the aorta. Whoops, I want that black again. The aorta. And then from the aorta, it goes into the rest of the body. So we'll just put body over here. And then on its way back from the body, it's going to go through the superior and the inferior vena cava on its way back. And so it'll be red until it gets to the body. But once it meets all the body cells and delivers its oxygen and picks up carbon dioxide, it now is sort of what we call blue blood. And then it comes back and it pools in the right atrium on the other side of the heart. That's why the top part is reversed, because the right atrium is really on the other side of the heart. And then from the right atrium, it crosses downwards into the right ventricle through the tricuspid valve. Then, from the right ventricle, it goes this way in a circle. And the first place it goes is into what are called the pulmonary arteries, the left Whoops, I wanted that black. So the left and right pulmonary arteries. And then from there, of course, it makes its way to the lungs. And then after the lungs, it enters into the left and right pulmonary veins. And it makes its way back to the left atrium. So it's leaving the heart, but once it gets to the lungs, this blue blood is now recharged with oxygen. And so we switch to red. And it goes into the pulmonary veins, and then it comes back and it lands into the left atrium, which then squeezes, well, I guess if I just draw it like that, across there to the left ventricle. And if we want in green, we can remind ourselves that right here and right here are the two major valves of the heart. Between the right atrium and the right ventricle is the tricuspid valve. And over here, this one is the mitral valve between the left side of the heart. And there is also a valve right here, the aortic valve, as you enter the aorta, which prevents the backward flow of blood into the ventricle when it compresses very strongly. And right here, and when we move into the pulmonary artery, there is also here the pulmonary valve. Remember, the ventricles are the big muscular pushers of the heart. And so they need the valves to control the blood and keep it from going backwards. So that's kind of a blood flow sort of flow chart, but it's not a graphical picture because we had to reverse the top two atria. We had to change the left and right to make the picture sort of work without having too many overlapping lines. If we did it the way it looks in a real heart, then we'd have too many crisscrosses, and I just find this more confusing. So this is just a flow chart to help you remember the path of blood. So if you start at the left ventricle, you can trace it, right? Left ventricle to the aorta, to the body, to the vena cavas, the inferior and the superior, then into the right atrium, and then down through the tricuspid valve to the right ventricle, which then pumps out through the pulmonary arteries. There's a pulmonary valve in there too, and then into the lungs, and then back to the heart through the pulmonary veins, to the left atrium, through the mitral valve, and right back where we started at the left ventricle. That sort of slishy slosh of blood moving around through the heart. Okay? And I think that's just about it. We've got the heart down pat, so we'll just stop there.